Good evening and welcome to the Pompey Politics Podcast.
I'm Ian Tiny Morris.
And I'm Simon Sainsbury.
And welcome to another sunny evening on the South Coast Riviera with the sun beating down. We opt this evening to chat with a couple of folk for whom the sun has gently set on their time as councillors and on Portsmouth City Council. And Simon's gone quiet. I was perhaps stunned at the weather
Hello there.
reference.
Don't know.
The neatness of the link.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know if that was all muted because I've only just come back in. So were you all okay?
No, I was waxing lyrical about sunshine and sunsets on Portsmouth City Council careers. So we're joined this evening live by ex-Councillor Lynne Stagg. How are you, Lynne?
Fine, thank you. Well, yes, fine-ish. I mean, considering I had open heart surgery a few weeks back, I'm not too bad.
Marvelous. Well, glad to see that's all gone well, and you're up and about and well. And we did a little recording earlier today, Simon.
We did indeed. So later on, we've got a segment with Rob New, who unfortunately we couldn't get him in this evening, but he's joined us earlier on today. But joining us obviously live, we've got Lynne, who thankfully has given us part of our Sunday evening.
So marvelous. We'll dive straight into the question. So Lynne, for those of you that for those of our listeners who perhaps don't know you, can you introduce yourself and give us a little insight into how you got into politics and how you ended up becoming a councillor?
Right, thank you. Yes, well, I'm Lynne Stagg. I've been one of the Baffins ward councillors for the last 16 years, from 2007 until last month. And my background, I was a teacher. I taught in London, first of all, then in Plymouth, then in Sydney, Australia, and then in Portsmouth. And I retired from full-time teaching in 2002, and I did a bit of part-time teaching. And then a former colleague of mine, Darren Phillips, he was standing for election in 2006, and I wanted to ask him a question because I was involved with Baffins, the Great Salters Preservation Society, and I wanted to ask him, as a councillor, could he do such and such for me? And I ended up doing some deliveries for him. And then one day he said to me, have you ever thought of becoming a councillor? And I said, nope, not interested in politics in the slightest. I've always voted in elections, but I'm not interested. And he said, well, what's the problem? I said, well, I haven't got enough time. And he said, it doesn't take very long. I said, how much is very long? He said, oh, it's only about 2 evenings a week. And stupidly, I believed him. And I didn't check with anybody else because I didn't really know any other councillors. So anyway, that's how I ended up standing in 2007 and getting in with quite a comfortable majority, which was quite a surprise and very pleasurable. I'm a Lib Dem, not because I'm an activist in any shape or form, never have been, but ever since, well, starting with the SDP, I've always voted for them. So before that, I used to vote Labour, and then I got disgruntled with Labour, so I didn't bother voting for them. I've never voted Conservative in my life, but I was, as you can tell by my accent, I'm not a native of Portsmouth. I come originally from Swansea. I was at university in Aberystwyth, and that was a hotbed of Welsh nationalism. And I was a great supporter of Plaid Cymru in those days. But I was you had to be 21. I'm that old, yeah. You had to be 21 before you could vote. So I never got to vote while I was at university, and there wasn't much chance of voting for Plaid Cymru in London. So that went by the board, and that's when I voted Labour. So that's my history. I come from a very working class background, very working class. Grew up in a 2-up 2-down terrace house with an outside loo. and both my parents had left school at 14. None of them were I was adopted as well. I was 5 weeks old when I was adopted. So I was brought up with an older brother, 15 years older than me. And we used to have some interesting conversations when I was at home, because my father was staunch Labour, was a shop steward and union member and what have you. My mother was really liberal, but she voted Labour because my father told her to. She was that generation, where the wife did as husband told her. My brother, who was a building society manager, was Conservative, and I was Plaid Cymru. So we had some very interesting conversations.
It sounds like you whilst you may have not considered yourself to be a politician, it sounds like you grew up in very fertile political grounds.
Absolutely, yes. We used to have meetings here in my house, union meetings, because my father was the treasurer of the local branch, and so I got to know everybody that way. Yes.
Excellent.
And that's quite. How does that upbringing compare to the council chamber?
Well, it's a mixture, to be fair, because there are other people who, like me, came from very working class backgrounds, and it's a real mixture. You got from one end, people who went to private school and came from families who have been staunchly Conservative or Labour or Lib Dem all their lives, and there are others who have changed as they've gone along, as they've grown up. So yeah, it's nice to have a mixture.
Okay, so moving on, I guess. So that's how you got into politics, even if that, even if that was just the gateway drug of leaflet delivering you were saying earlier on. So what's behind your decision to stand down? You've been elected.
Partly my age. I mean, I'm 79 on Thursday, so I think it's time that somebody younger came in with new ideas. My health was another thing, because it's in addition to the open heart surgery, my dear darling dogs pulled me over into the gutter back at the end of January and broke my left shoulder, and that's still in a very, very dodgy position now. So it was very difficult. It was so much pain to carry on and do things as effectively as I should. And so and the other thing was, I've given service. I mean, as a teacher, you do more than just teach. You are a social worker as well. So I've done lots of things for everybody else. I've got 3 children. I got divorced when my children were quite young, so I was always on the road because they all did different activities. So I was on the road every day of the week, taking them to rugby, soccer, tennis, squash, gymnastics. What else were they? Orchestra, Portsmouth School's orchestra. You name it. I was sort of, and then all the background stuff that goes with that. The raising money through jumble sales, etc. So I felt it's time before I actually sort of finally kick the bucket. To have a bit of time for myself.
So there isn't like a big project you're moving on to. It's just actually you want to dial things back a bit and just enjoy the time, really.
Yes, but there are 1 or 2 things I want to pick up on. I mean, we did start, and it wasn't us as councillors, although we were on the committee, Love Baffins, and we had a Christmas market in Tangier Road, and then the person who was organising that left and nobody picked it up. So I'd like to pick that up and reintroduce that if I possibly can. I'd like to, there are a lot of people living in the ward who've lived there all their lives, and they have such amazing memories. I want to pull those together if I can and have memories of Baffins, because once those people die, their memories go with them. And there are lots of little stories. There's one lady who lives in my ward. She was 100. She must be 101 now. And she could talk for Britain. She was absolutely amazing. But she has lived in Baffins from the age of 2. And she took the whole history, of the Baffins farm and how she used to play with the children of the farm, and what it was like during the war. So those memories I'd like to get together and yeah, get a book, because I do. Margaret Foster, who was one of our councillors in St Charles Dickens ward, she lives in Portsea. She got a lot of people's memories of the mudlarkers, and she raised money. She produced a book, and the profits from that went to buy the statue, which now stands outside the gate to the historic dockyard. So you know that people have done this sort of thing before, and it's good, you know, that people's memories don't die like that. So that's one thing. And I've talked with the director who's in charge of the libraries, and he's sort of supporting that. And I saw a programme the other night actually on TV, and I honed in because it was from Swansea, and it was the oh, what the heck do you call them? They knit things to go over bollards and stuff like that.
Oh, is it guerrilla knitting or
yarn bombers?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
Yes. And I thought we could do that in Portsmouth, in Baffins. I'm very much into the community. I belong to the Baffins Pond Association, and you know, community things. So we've got a dipping pond now, but it's not fully sorted. But that's something I want to carry on with. So,
well, definitely lots to carry on with then, and like you say, it'd be great to get all those memories, that generational record of the Baffins gone by, before it's lost forever. So yeah,
absolutely, yes.
So just reflecting back on your time in council, we know from social media that that people become a local councillor for the fame and the money. But what would you say are the biggest misconceptions of what the role of a councillor involves?
Yes. Many people out there think that we earn the same salary as MPs, which is about 84,000 a year, I think. And I try to explain that they don't believe you, of course, because they only want to believe what they believe, and they don't want the truth. I mean, that really ruins their perceptions. But the other thing that's fascinating, they think we've got the power to do everything that the police do. You know, why haven't we sorted out the traffic, you know, on Tangier Road? Because we can't actually do that. We can put in things to slow down traffic, etc., but we have no power to arrest people or hand out fines, or unless they're travelling in a bus lane, which they're not supposed to do. So those are the two biggest misconceptions. And with it, of course, it goes, such toxicity, and that has got worse in the 16 years I've been a councillor. I wouldn't like to start my life as a councillor now. It is just so toxic. People seem to think that because you're in public office, you're open to any kind of abuse that's going, and it's just totally wrong, you know. But there we are. That's people, isn't it?
And I think, you know, obviously, you know, never afraid of a hot seat, Lynne. Obviously, traffic and transport.
Yes.
I understand that all the parking problems of the city were entirely your fault, and the fact that you didn't fix them in 60.
Yes. Oh yes.
So I guess
sorry.
That must have been something. I'm sure you got your fair share of feedback on why the parking issues weren't sorted yet.
Yes, and when you tell people the reality, you know, they don't want to know it. I'll give you an example. We had an exhibition, I suppose, just on Copner Road, because the area where I'm living had been asking for years, ever since I became a councillor, for residents parking. So we wanted to let the surrounding areas, people in the surrounding areas, know, you know, what was involved. And this couple came up to me and said, well, what the wife said, what am I supposed to do? And I said, in what way? And she said, well, we've got 4 cars. And I said, oh, you've got off-road parking, have you? And she said, no. And I said, so where do you park your cars then? She said, well, outside of the road. So I said, well, you've only got room outside your house to park 1. So where did the other 3 go? And she said, well, elsewhere on the road. I said, oh, so where somebody else could be parking their car outside their house? And the husband came up to me and he said, you're taking away my civil rights. I said, am I? How? What way? And he said, well, you're telling me I can only have one car. I said, no, what I'm telling you is you've only got room for one car.
Yep.
And so he told me to F off and called me, I won't say, but he started the letter C and went off. And so
Conservative.
that, you know, when you, I don't know, I didn't bother. I was so dumbfounded by that, you know, I thought, oh, just leave it. And I say to people, you know, the reason we've got a major parking problem in Portsmouth is we've got too many cars for the amount of parking spaces available. It's simple, you know, it's not massive science. It is simply, you know, outside each house, you've got room for one vehicle. And if you've got 5 vehicles or whatever, you know, you just, there's no room for them. So the answer is to reduce the number of cars.
Absolutely. Simon.
Yeah. So and that brings us swiftly on that mathematical equation that brings us swiftly on to. So what would you say your highest and the lowest points have been of your many years? What's the highs and lows?
Well, the highs have been when, you know, when we've done something and people have said it's not going to work, and it turns out that it does work. The lowest ones are, I mean, we did it, and we had to try it. During lockdown, we followed Grant Chapp's suggestions, you know, about having creating more space for active travel, so for bikes. So we stopped the parking in Elm Grove, and it was a complete and utter disaster. But it had to be done to prove that it wasn't going to work. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could have said, well, I don't think it's going to work. Well, how do you know what people say unless you try it? Because you've got the two ends of the spectrum. Those people who believe that cycling is the be-all and end-all of everything, and, you know, nobody should have a car. And then there are those the other end who say, you know, cycles and cyclists are a pain in the rear end and we don't want them. So it doesn't matter what you do with transport. You please some of the people some of the time, but not all of the people all the time. So some of the bad points are that. But coming away from that, I have to say I was Lord Mayor for a year, and that was an amazing year. It was knackering. I did about, I think I totted up, I think it was just over 950 sort of meetings or during the year. And I met such a lovely variety of people. Not just, yes, I met the Queen, Princess Anne, who's absolutely amazing. Prince William, we talked about football. We compared Pompey with Aston Villa and so forth. And he was just so ordinary. Charles and Camilla. But I also met loads of people, you know, the carers, the people who look after somebody all the time, the young carers, the kids of 5, 6 years old, you know, who are carers for one of their parents or for an older brother or sister. People from the blind society that used to be in, oh God, what's the name of the road? Just Powers Court Road, I think they used to, yes, going there, you know, and so many people, and this wonderful lady, it was her 103rd birthday. She was in a residential home, Doreen her name was, and I went in and I took her some jelly babies because I'd been told she loved jelly babies. So I had the chauffeur with me, and so I sat down and I was chatting to her. She had one of those hats on that looked like a Christmas birthday cake, you know, and happy as Larry she was. She said, who's that over there? Meaning the chauffeur. I said, that's my chauffeur. She said, handsome, isn't he? I said, yeah, he's not bad looking, I suppose. She said, is he married? And I said, I don't think so. Oh, I said, but I think he might have a partner. Oh, she said. I said, are you disappointed? She said, yes. And she said, I've got a chance there, have I? And I said, oh, go on, Doreen. I said, nothing ventured, nothing gained. She said, do you reckon? And I thought, if I could be like that at 103, absolutely wonderful. So So yeah, I met all sorts, and it was just such an eye-opener, being involved in so many things. So from both ends of the spectrum.
Marvelous. So in your 16 years, you've seen a whole range of group leaders. How do you think Councillor Steve Pitt will change and shape the direction of Portsmouth now he's council leader?
Well, Steve is I don't always agree with Steve, but then none of us, I'm sure, always agree with our leaders. I mean, not that he's my leader, but Steve is a straight down the middle person. He does things, or he suggests we do things because he thinks that's the right thing to do. And I think that's important, because you know where you stand with him, and you're arguing not on sort of nebulous things. He will argue the case for it, because he will look through everything and pinpoint every point. So I think he'd be good. I don't necessarily think don't think everybody's going to agree with him, because he is, if I say he's a black and white person, that sounds a bit too strong, but he's more black and white than grey.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean.
No, I think Steve definitely comes across as forthright, and
Yes,
he believes what he believes.
Yeah,
So
yeah. But if you can persuade him, that he's thinking the wrong way. But no, I think he's strong, and I think that's important. But the one thing that I like to see about the Lib Dems, which I don't like about the others, I don't like to be told what to do. And that's one thing I like about the Lib Dems. We're a very argumentative lot of people, and we'll argue through things umpteen times. But you can't do that with some of the other parties, because you get directions from head office, and we don't get the same sort of thing. Well, I think we're more pragmatic, we will do what we think is right, even if that is not what, or it may be something that one of the other parties agrees with. Just because they're opposition doesn't mean to say we disagree with everything that they come up with. So that's what I like it. Yeah,
I think it was interesting at the count this year. Many of the people who were returned spoke very passionately and warmly about the Lib Dem family, and I guess as with all families, when you pull together, it's great, but you've got to have those arguments over the Christmas turkey as well.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's an important part, because otherwise you don't look at every angle of it. You've got your own idea, and it's only when somebody else points things out that you sort of might think, oh God, yes, I hadn't thought of that. So yeah, it is a very good, it is a family. Yeah, very much so. And I think Steve will be okay. We'll do all right. Yes.
So parties generally tend to struggle to find candidates overall. Do you think this is down to anything in particular, or do you have any ideas about how they could fix that, make it easier for people to find it easier to make it easier to find people to stand, or even to ask questions?
I don't think there's an easy answer to that at all. Ideally, we should have more younger people in, but let's face it, if you've got a job, you've got a salary coming in, if you've got a family, you need to have that money. Just under, I think it's about 11,000 a year you get as a councillor in Portsmouth. You can't support a family on that at all. And you can't, in all honesty, I don't know how anybody can do a full-time job and be a full-time councillor, particularly if you've got a portfolio. I mean, I was working 50 hours a week. That was the norm. I mean, often there'd be there was one evening when I did Susie, I think, had written to me, or Susie Horton. She was just about to start doing her email, and it was something like 10:15 at night, and about 3/4 an hour later, Steve joined in. He said, "I just finished mine." So that's the sort of thing. No, you can't do that and have a full-time job. You've got to get up in the morning and be bright and breezy, but also you've got meetings. So and women, again, it's a difficult one, because if you got children, I mean, I would never, ever in a million years have dreamt of becoming a councillor when my kids were young, because my time was with them until they reached an age where, you know, they were more independent. I would never have done it because, you know, because your family suffers, and that's wrong. How you solve that, I don't know, unless you have full-time, properly paid councillors. I can't see that happening at all, because there isn't the money, is there? So I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. I've tried, you know, to persuade more women and people from ethnic minorities as well, because we're, you know, we're short of them, and we have so many quite large ethnic minorities in Portsmouth, and they really should be contributing. You know, not just contributing because it's expected of them, but to represent their people, their groups of people, because what they need, what they want, is not necessarily the same as what another group wants, you know, because of the nature of their ethnicity. I mean, well, so I'd like to see far more Muslim women, for example, involved on the council. And we've also got a large group of Kurdish people in the community. The Chinese, I mean, the Chinese, we've got the biggest, I think it's the biggest group of Chinese in the whole of the South Coast, even more than Southampton. I think I'm right in saying that. And yet we have very little representation on the council. So I'd like to see more of that. And I don't know, I think we have to make it more appealing to them. But how can you make something appealing when you say, well, you've got to work 50 hours a week and you'll get a load of abuse on social media and everywhere else. So, you know, but we only pay you 11,000 a year. Come on in and join us. That's a hard thing to try and sell.
It's a £4 an hour, which is, I think, roughly what it works out as. Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That we you know, we wouldn't expect anybody working for the council to be paid that, except the councillors, who we expect an awful lot of. For,
yes, I must say, not all councillors work that hard. You've got some who are lazy individuals, and they just pick up money, you know. And there are others who work way over the amount of time that they should be working, and that's because they are devoted to their work. You know, it's not trying to be better than anybody else, but some portfolios. I mean, Kimberly Barrett, for example, who does environment. I mean, there's so much in there because the climate change thing is gathering momentum all the time. She's at so many meetings, she's seeing so many people, she's going so many places. She's got 2 young children, yeah. It's difficult. How on earth can you expect her? I know she was working out one day. There was one week she said she was earning just over £2 an hour for that week, because she had so much to do. So
it is a shocker. So apart from the remuneration and attraction of councillors, looking back on your time in PCC, if there's one thing that you feel desperately needs to change, what would that be?
Something that's not likely to change because of the nature of a council, and that is for things to happen quicker, because we get residents on our back, you know, why hasn't this been done, blah 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 blah. Well, you've got, because the council is handling people's money, everything has to be done meticulously, so it has to go to procurement. So, you know, if you want something done, they've got to okay that what you want it for is genuine, is okay. And because you've got so many departments and people, I've noticed it, I think, more since lockdown, because more people are working hybrid, so you can't always get hold of people when you'd like to, whereas they used to be in the office. They're probably now working from home, and it's not quite as easy, you know, so one thing I missed more than anything was being able to, if I was doing something, if I was in the members room, group room, and I wanted to find something out about any particular aspect of transport, I would nip up to the next floor and I'd go along and see, because people be sitting there and say, oh, John, you're blah, 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 such and such. And can't do that any longer. And that always took them a lot more time. By the time you sent an email to somebody and they actually picked it up and then they replied to it and sent it back to you, but it wasn't everything that you wanted to know in there, so you've got to send another one. Do you know what I mean? So,
yep.
So things weren't as fast as I would like them to be. And I can't see us going back to being full-time in the office, because it suits and it does, it works well for a lot of people. So I know with transport, they were sort of meeting particular days, you know, Tuesday was a day when they would all come in for various things. But it still only leaves, you know, a small portion of the day rather than of the week, rather than the whole week where you can contact people. So sometimes it's not that easy. And then as a result, you don't get, the communication tends to break down a bit, you know. Whereas if you see people on a regular basis, you can say, can you do such and such, or can you answer that? So that's one thing. And I don't know what the answer is to that. I just find it frustrating that things are held up. And that's not criticizing the officers, because they do a really good job. It's just the way the setup is now, you know. So.
Thank you, Lynn. Well, and lovely to give us that insight. And I guess we would wish you a happy retirement, but based on the list of, you strike me as a person who's, I'm going to take it easy, apart from these 27 things that I intend to keep working on.
Yeah,
So
yes,
so
yes,
that's
that's me. I'm not going to change there. I've had to slow down these last few weeks because I was back in hospital last Monday for 3 days because I had fluid on the lung. They thought it might have been a pulmonary embolism, but it wasn't, thank goodness. So I've had to slow down, which is driving me nuts because I just don't have the energy. But, I'm sure it'll all
come good in the end. So no, that's been absolutely marvelous, Lynn. Thank you for that, Simon.
Oh, I'm on the executive as well. I don't know why. I said to Peter, Brooke, why the hell have you got me on the executive? Because I'm not a politician. He said, that's why we want you on the executive. So I don't know how true that is. There
Well, there we go. It seems like your days, hopefully you won't be doing any 50-hour weeks anymore, but it seems like your days aren't exactly going to be feet up in the garden. So
no, my garden's a shambles, I have to say, yes.
well, thank you for giving us some of your Sunday, Lynn. Thank you very much for sharing all your answers, and all the best, and good luck with all of those community projects in Baffins.
Thank you. Have a nice evening.
Thanks. Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye. So thanks to Lynn for joining us. So our other contributor this evening unfortunately couldn't join us live, as we were saying earlier on. So we've got a recorded interview with Rob New, who also stood down in May. Are we good for me to play Rob's interview?
Yeah, roll BT, I believe in.
Is the term?
Yes, it is the term, and it looks like my dog is playing up. So
okay.
Yes.
Well,
we'll run the VT, mute the mics, and we'll work out what's going on.
Okay.
Jumping straight in. For those of you that kind of don't know you, can you introduce yourself and kind of how you got involved in politics?
So I got involved in politics around 2005, 2006 as a basic leafleter going out for Penny Mordaunt and Donna Jones and Conservative councillors of the day, because the honest truth is it was the only way I'd get to spend time with my then partner on a Saturday, who was dedicated to the cause. And actually it kind of went from there. So I became councillor in 2011, was elected successfully for 3 terms. and then decided that, I wanted to do other things. I also work for Penny Mordaunt MP in Parliament as well. And as many people in Portsmouth will have seen, she's doing some big stuff. And so, yeah, so it's been an exciting ride, and it's great so far. So that's me in a nutshell.
Marvellous. Thank you, Robert.
Okay, so that leads us to the next inevitable question: is what was behind your decision to stand down?
So I'm also chairman of Portsmouth North Conservatives, and this is my outgoing year. So this ties in lots of things up nicely for me. So it's my last year as chairman. I think you have to make way for new blood to come in to the council. I myself personally am a big critic of career politicians in local government, and like sometimes you need to know when you need to stand aside and when you've given all you can give, and when you should also go on, I think, to look to embrace other challenges and avenues. Someone once said an analogy to me, and that was a table with one leg, like you see like fancy tables at exhibitions, is easy to take out. If a table has many legs, it's harder to topple it.
And in that example, are you the table or the leg?
Oh, it depends. I think I'm probably the person with the bat.
Okay. So what are you going to do with all of that free time?
Well, funnily enough, I thought I would have more free time, but I don't really. So I also co-founded a marine organisation with Councillor Daniel Weems, which is going from strength to strength, called Conservative Friends of the Ocean. I'll talk about that in a bit, actually, because there's some work I'm quite proud of that the council has taken on under the current administration, and I'm working closely with them and with officers, but also councils across the country. So, and then, of course, Penny is leader of the House of Commons, Lord President of the Privy Council. It is a full schedule. Plus, I get to do a little bit more surfing.
A little bit. Thank you.
So we often see on social media, Rob, that people get into being a local councillor for the fame and the big money. What do you think is the biggest misconception of what people believe being a local councillor is about?
Well, I think from casework, and I can say this with 12 years under my belt, plus parliamentary casework, is that people think that politicians, local government and MPs actually are like demigods, like they have superpowers to resolve things. They don't. And so often I think the perception that is wrong is that they can affect change at every level. They can't. They've got one lane that they can stay in, and it's basically council, mostly regulatory things that they can help with, and they can foster. And they actually do have huge amounts of power, like soft power, I suppose, if you will, to affect positive change. But a lot of that is about co-working, cross-party, and with officers. So Councillor Lee Hunt once gave me some great advice, and this would actually be a good thing, I think, for members of the public who do think that you can just change everything for them and make their problems go away, is that there are three powers in the council. There is the administration, the opposition, and then the civil service. And you have to work across all of those to effectively help people. But even then, you can't always fulfill the expectations of what people think. And so, so many people think a councillor is like an MP, for example, and it's like they're not. And people think that MPs are there, as like some sort of powerful like deity, and it's like they're not.
So I guess it's that your ability to influence and change. Well, I wrote to my local councillor and he did nothing. Is the narrative that you're fighting against? Yeah,
and you get that in local government. You see it in elections. Like there are some people, who have very strong views on certain issues. For example, the whole kind of like stop the boats thing. Like I'm no fan of Suella Braverman, for example. I think she's quite a bad person. But, there would be people in the local elections who like, I'm not voting for you as a local councillor because you're not stopping the boats. And it's like, there's nothing it's like, it's not a councillor's remit. A councillor's remit is to deal with council functions, things like drop curbs, dog poo bins, where they're placed, council tax, those kind of things, potholes in roads. it's those kind of things, or housing issues, social services issues. So it's a large remit, but it's often not what is chiming with the public, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I guess Rob New out on your surfboard, just inviting boats. Do you mind turning back? Probably isn't going to cut it, is it, Rob?
No, probably not.
Simon.
Interesting that it's all P's though. Was it poo, planning, parking, and I'm sure there was another one, but I can't remember what it was. But yeah, so there we go. Okay, so thinking back, obviously now you've had time to have a rest since however you felt when you woke up on May the 5th. What would you say are the highest and lowest points of your time as councillor?
So I think probably the highest points, and of course they're kind of like uncelebrated things, because a lot of the casework you do is incredibly complex. Some of the work is, you could never sing about it anyway because it's private. So I think probably the proudest things that I've done, actually there's a few. The first one is helping quite a few people not lose their council houses because they've got into financial difficulty, real strife. Like, most people fall into crisis at some point during their life and they don't know where to turn. And quite often the way that people cope with that is they kind of close down, they stick their head in the sand, they don't open their mail that comes in. And then of course the situation does get worse, but eventually it reaches a crescendo where they do need help. And I think that's probably one of my proudest things. And the council does have processes, but it does also have the ability to help people in crisis. Sometimes you have to remind those in charge on an officer level that, we can spend the next 3 months fighting over this, or we can recognize this person's in crisis. They really need some help. It could lead on to worse mental health problems for them. Dare I say even suicide in some cases. Or we can just get to work now and we can try and find a way to get this resolved very quickly, get a plan in place. Somebody said to me once, the worst feeling is waking up with the dread, the anxiety, which, it can all be resolved. So I think I was lucky in that, like, I'm not afraid of knocking on, fortress doors, so to speak. I'm not afraid of shouting at people if I know it's the right thing to do and that they should be doing it. And I have to say, in nearly all of those cases, the officers were superb, and so were the politicians that helped. And, so I think that's probably one of my proudest things. It's not something that you can really shout about, but I think things like that can only also come from a place of like a lived experience as well. Like, I've been on hard times, very hard times at times, has been well documented when I was plastered all over the front page of the Portsmouth News for various things. They didn't care about the hardship I was going through, but I remember it because I remember how I felt. And so when you listen to some of those residents, and a lot of them, I have to say, weren't even in Copner Ward, they were from all over the city. So I think I felt quite proud that people used to come to me from not only my party, but other parties to ask for help on it, because, I think they knew I was a bit of a somebody that kind of wouldn't back down. And I have to say, pay tribute to Cal Corkery, as my Councillor Corkery, because he too has a bit of that fire on issues like that. Also, things like the sea defences, I'm really quite proud of. So, Councillor Hugh Mason, all of the work that's been done is transforming the defences and the protections for this island, and all of the stuff that went on at the time. Like, actually, I think we all stood quite united, perhaps apart from the Labour Party, in terms of the vision. We could see where it could go, and sure, things could still be done better, but with the money that was then made available by the government and DEFRA and the Environment Agency, I think it's shaping up quite nicely. It looks pretty good, and we've won some awards for parts of it. I'm really proud of that. And actually, I was super proud. So one of the first problems I was able to resolve was ensuring that Anchorage Park was the first section that was done to stop the flooding issues that were affecting people there, their housing insurance premiums, etc. So yeah, there's been quite a bit of work. But again, it's not really like stuff that you celebrate publicly, is it? Because it's a bit like, it's private, it's a bit grey, it's a bit, bit crisis based.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because, like you say, it sounds like a lot of the things that you're really personally proud of are obviously, quite rightly, things that you can't discuss because they're very personal to the person or the family that you helped. But also the other things actually aren't necessarily the kind of the big shouty, sexy things that kind of get people excited on leaflets.
Yeah, so exactly that.
Interesting contrast.
Yeah. And then I think probably the last thing as well. Sorry, I know this is a very long-winded answer, so apologies.
Don't worry.
I think the last thing that I'm probably quite proud of was kind of like my parting shot, as it were, and it was a nice one, was the motion for the ocean, which was very detailed and very complex. And a lady called Emily Cunningham is the co-author of the concept and the actual original motion for the ocean. And Daniel and I, Councillor Daniel Weems, were able to take it, work with them to be able to make it so it's Portsmouth based. And I loved it. Kimberly, Councillor Kimberly Barrett, who is the cabinet member for climate change, also loved it. And she didn't take it as tokenism, you know, so credit to her. She took it, she ran with it. Actually, she's just invited me to come and take part in a large public meeting, a forum on this, on next steps, because Portsmouth being an island city is, you know, there's so many opportunities that we can have, and we're starting to see some of them, but there's so much more that we can do, especially around ocean literacy, swimming, having that connection with the sea, thriving coastal communities. So that was really exciting for me, and I was also quite proud of that.
Cool. Anything that's the opposite end of the spectrum?
Yeah, that there are still too many incompetent people in place that don't make good decisions on an officer level, who are paid far too much money. And that, you know, I called it out with the current chief executive, and he would just roll his eyes and ignore you. But you know what? I was proven right on many of those things, but those people are still there. You know, I think they're doing a disservice to the city. But thankfully, there are more good ones that outweigh the bad ones.
Okay, thank you. Ian?
In those 12 years, Rob, you've seen many of the group leaders come and go, and some very big personalities have been evident in local politics. How do you think the council will fare under the leadership of Councillor Steve Pitt, who now has the big chair?
Well, I think Steve Pitt should have been the leader a couple of years ago, to be honest, because look, I like Steve, and I have to say I have an immense amount of respect for him, because during the pandemic, when lots of people were on furlough, our office, Penny Mordaunt's office, you know, we were working flat out. Like sometimes we were on 4 or 5 hours of sleep a night. We were dealing with all sorts of crises, many of the things we weren't trained to deal with. So was Steve. He wasn't leader of the council then, but so many people, politicians who were way out of their depth, were locked down in silos, and it just seemed like they were avoiding their responsibility to me. He wasn't. He was there every step of the way. And like, it was like we were all supporting each other, and he was superb then. And I saw his leadership qualities like up close working with him, and I'll never forget that.
No, I think we observed on the podcast that it was almost a brutal result, that having, you know, worked tirelessly for the city for a year, you know, he ended up losing his seat. But we've also reflected that possibly that year out was the best thing that could have happened for Steve, so that he could come back a little bit refreshed, having had that time away.
Absolutely, you know, and what I would also say is that, you know, often things work out like it's almost like the universe has a plan for all of us, isn't it? You know, and I'm not like into kind of mumbo jumbo stuff, but sometimes it does. And I have to say, Councillor Charlotte Gerarda, who was elected, is superb. And, you know, as a leader, as a person, as a politician, I really think that, you know, the council was richer for the current setup that it currently has, with Councillor Gerarda on in Central South Sea Ward, Councillor Steve Pitt as leader. Of course, I would like a Conservative leader, you know, but you know, we don't have the numbers at this time. So I think Councillor Pitt, you know, I wish him every success, and I'm, you know, continue to work with him anyway through a parliamentary aspect.
Brilliant.
Lovely. So, talking of candidates, all parties seem to, at one time or another, struggle to find candidates, and especially kind of in target wards. And just to explain it for listeners, just from a sheer kind of marshalling of resources perspective, there'll be paper candidates in wards where parties unfortunately aren't able to actually level kind of any campaigning, but they literally need to have someone on the ballot paper. But even with that, various parties seem to struggle to find candidates. Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a multifaceted answer. So I think first and foremost, one of the things that I see as chairman is you kind of get 2 or 3 camps of people that come forward. You've got the glory hunters and the title seekers, you know, who don't want to help people. So I always think the driving goal should be to help people. That is actually what elected representatives are there. Doesn't matter what level, whether it's parish, borough, unitary council, county council, parliament, whatever, that has got to be the driving goal. For a lot of people, it isn't. They're about status, etc. Well, fine, you can sniff those people out a mile out, and then you can deal with them, because it's about managing people, right? Then you get the people who are humbled by their experiences, and they want to go out. They want to use what they've learned to help people so that they don't have to go through all the hardship they went through. They're often salt of the earth people, and quite good, and they make great local councillors in my experience. And I'm going to just pick on one example there, and that's my friend, Councillor Hannah Hockaday, now Councillor Brent, which I still can't get used to, by the way. I worked with Hannah from 2008, and she was a real community champion, and she wasn't into like the Westminster infighting. And I think the public are sick of that. And she has made such a great she became such a great local councillor. She was interested in all the things that, the glory hunters who I formerly mentioned absolutely were not. But I would say, hand on heart, she's helped far more people than those that seek status and free dinners.
Do you, and if parties are struggling, especially when I think in a couple of years we're facing the prospect of all-ups because of the boundary changes, what should parties be doing about trying to find candidates, and what advice would you give to people that are considering standing?
Well, I think one of the other problems, of course, is the remuneration. So, because one of the first things that you talk to a candidate about is what's required. While colleagues would completely, I think, join me in making the case of, but it depends on what you're wanting to get out of it, because you can technically do as little or as many hours as you like, as long as you turn up to a set amount of statutory full council meetings. But the reality is, if you're a good caseworker, it's going to take a lot of time. And therefore, that's going to eat into your evenings, your weekends, or dare I say, actually, like you'll probably have to balance your full-time job if you work with trying to get that fitted in. All of a sudden, you're like, wow, okay, the remuneration that they give you for the expenses is peanuts. So it's the old adage, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And in some cases, that is true. That, I think, is one of the main obstacles, especially with the cost of living crisis, the things that are happening now. And I mean, things aren't going to get better, I think, in the short term. So I think we're still looking at 2 or 3, 4 years away before we start to see light at the end of the tunnel on some of these issues. The pandemic really was a 2-3 year long issue, and coming out the back of that, it's going to take equally as long, possibly maybe a bit longer, in my opinion, for people to kind of get back onto a good kilter. So therefore, if you're saying to someone, come and be a councillor and do this, and that, like, I think that is a problem, because you've got to live.
Does it mean that does that limit the sorts of people that would even consider it? Because most people, when you think of single parents kind of struggling to raise their kids or whatever, or someone that's struggling with 1 or 2 jobs, they're just not going to have the time to be able to commit to it. Is that quite limiting then?
I think so. And I think some of those people would make superb councillors, by the way. But, it's not in their financial interest to do it. And some of them start out and they go through the candidacy route, I've seen in all parties. And then at the end, they're like, it's just so much work, especially because the campaign is the big hurdle they've got to get through first. And it does take a lot of time and money, as you know, Simon, being a candidate yourself. And then actually the work for the council, because the meetings will be all over the working week. That's why I think across the country, I think the average age of councillors is 55 to 65. A lot of them being on the retired end, and it's because they do have the time to do it. So apart from the financial impact and remuneration to be able to afford to be able to be in local government, especially in Portsmouth, where, look, let's not beat around the bush. It is, for all intents and purposes, as a rounded figure, a £500 million corporation. Paying a councillor 10 grand to have oversight on that, you're not going to attract the quality that you need. There are so many incredible people, and I'll just pick on again the demographic you spoke of, like a single mum, for example, who might be working a part-time job, etc., to top it up. A lot of those people are so switched on, like they just feel themselves, because we've got access to so much information. Like, they're so intelligent, they scrutinize, they watch things, they're watching all sorts of programs, I would say, where you know they're kind of accessing more kind of general information than probably I do on a day-to-day basis. You know, and I think they would make superb local government representatives, but there are barriers in the way for that. And also as well, I think there is a place for everyone in local government, but there are upsides and downsides, and people have to weigh that up on their own personal level, I think, to be able to make the decision on whether it's worth it for them and whether it's something they want to pursue.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, Rob. And apart from, and again, something I can echo, I've always looked at the councillor remuneration and thought, well, that's ridiculous. But apart from that, is there one thing, having seen 12 years of the mechanics of Portsmouth City Council, that you'd really like to change?
I think actually the planning department is the only one thing, but we're talking kind of politics, so I don't really know if it's the right forum to really discuss that in, because I think it all ties into the administration are clearly kind of like pulling their hair out about how to deal with that. This is a problem that's been in train for a long time. So, you know, and I'll be honest with you, and I can say this now because I'm a member of the public. The problem is the people they've got in the civil service. It is the head, or whatever he's called, deputy head of planning, or I know they've been pushing the deck chairs around on the deck, so to speak, with this. But the council seems to have a real problem, and I suspect on one hand it's because they don't pay enough. On the other hand, it's probably too expensive to get rid of the current person who is part of he is the problem. I'm going to say that. I don't care, you know, to be honest with you, because I've found him extremely frustrating to work with over the past 3, 4, 5 years, however long he's been in post. The former person before that, I thought was superb. She was offered a better job, and so she moved on as, you know, as her right, and she was great. She was always somebody you could go to with a major problem around those issues, and she would always take the time. She'd always have a caseworker ready to sort it out. You don't even get replies to your emails now. That's how bad it is. And what it says to the city of Portsmouth is, we're closed for business. That is not good. And so that's what I would like to see changed. And I feel sorry for the leader of the council on this issue, because I know that he is working to try and do it. I suspect he's between a rock and a hard place.
Absolutely. Just an additional question, Rob, which is, and again, your sign-off was extremely generous to all of the people that you had worked with. Even we were lovely and privileged to be the last word on your Facebook sign-off, which we greatly appreciated. And you've touched on it again in your answers, which is you seem to have a very collegiate approach to working, and seem to have a lot of respect for hardworking people other than people from quote unquote your own team. How do you see the sort of current polarization of politics, and how can that tide be turned so that we can disagree more nicely?
So that's a part of the problem, isn't it? And don't get me wrong, like when I first got involved, I was very much in the Punch and Judy gang, you know, House of Cards is really exciting. I learned the hard way. I learned from my mistakes. I also have a great mentor and somebody that's always put their wing around me, who's shown me a better way, I think, in politics. And actually, you know, I learned this in the pandemic, at the start of the pandemic. It is exhausting having to shout at people to get them to do their jobs. It's far better to build a proactive relationship with people so they want to help you and so they know you. And I have to say, I do have a lot of respect for people across the benches, people in my own party as well, that we've got some real stars. Councillor Lewis Gosling, Councillor Hannah Brandt, Councillor Daniel Weems, and also Simon, you know, Councillor Simon Bosher is our group leader. There ain't nothing he don't know about the city council. If you need to know something, and you also need someone to go to bat for you on your team, he will stand with you. He will be your Targaryen dragon by your side, and he will probably do, and because he's got such great relationships with the officers, he will probably do some of the nice behind the scenes, look, can we just get this sorted? This is why X, Y, and Z. And he is fantastic at that. And so I have a huge amount of respect for him. But the reason why I did sign off and pay homage to those people is because I really liked working with them, is the honest truth. And I think that we're better together, to quote, you know, the great late Joe Cox. And Penny Mordaunt was really good friends with Joe. So I've seen it up close and personal in Westminster. When times are hard, you have to pull together with people. You might not always agree on everything, but mostly you share the same end goals and the end of the journey, the destination. It's just how we get there is what we don't agree on. But by working together, you can kind of, so I'm all about pragmatism for the most part now. And I think can promise, if you can get to the end goal and you can do it well, does it really matter in the end how you get there? Probably not.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
A really generous and insightful interview there from Rob.
Yeah, that was I
thought I had wanted.
Sorry, go on.
No, it was, we were timing that perfectly, but no, I thought that was very insightful, and Rob, generous as ever.
Yes, indeed. There's a timed appearance by your cat. So yeah, interesting in the similarities in the things that both Lynne and Rob were saying and around the sorts of things that are limiting the sorts of people that are able to stand for council and take part, and how difficult that is difficult thing that is to crack, but also the frustration in just how long it takes to get things done, and wanting that to be more rapid and more responsive. I guess in a time where, especially with the social media age, residents can be in touch with you by email or by social media pretty much 24/7, and thereby pretty much want rapid responses and want things done quickly. But it doesn't seem that everybody's kind of. I think lots of organisations struggle to respond to that. The disparity then between what speed they operate and what speed the public actually want things done.
Absolutely, and as in 2 weeks' time, it will be the second anniversary of me trying to get the lack of a drop curb outside Highbury buildings sorted, so that it's not an absolute death trap for myself and my guide dogs, is testament to how long these things can take. But no, as you say, wonderful to see two politicians who have served the city extremely well, from different sides of the chamber, agreeing on so much. So with that, we shall sign off. You've been listening to the Pompey Politics Podcast. I've been Ian Tiny Morris.
And our guests have been the former councillors Lynne Stagg and Rob New, and I've been Simon Sainsbury. Join us next week at 6:27 for our next episode of the Pompey Politics Podcast. Don't forget to like, follow, share, subscribe, all of those lovely things that mean that you get notifications of our next episode on either Facebook or YouTube, and also follow us wherever you listen to us, if you're just listening to us without the visual, because we can appreciate that we've both got faces for radio. So join us next week.